Let's get across the market open now. Jimmy Jang joining us from GBA Capital. Jimmy, welcome back. Good to see you on this Tuesday. Markets globally hitting new records overnight. Clearly, a number of factors at play. It's a big week with that Xi-Trump meeting later in the week. Also, of course, the Fed decision, and we have those earnings results on Wall Street.
Morning, Andrew. Yeah, certainly it's going to be a big week for all the investors out there. We got on top of what you just kind of mentioned, Andrew, we also hope those reportings coming out from the, companies in the S&P 500. About nearly 180 out of that 500 companies are yet to kind of set to report at the moment. So far, we've seen about nearly a quarter of that, with the report. Largely, tone's been quite positive. Earnings generally coming above expectation, particularly in tech and consumer discretionary. We've seen another record high in the S&P 500. Nasdaq nearly about 1.9% overnight, which is another strong kind of support that we're seeing in the tech side as well. So we got these, like you mentioned, the Fed expecting largely to cut rates, and also we got some big kind of central banks making decisions on top of that as well. So due to that reason, we saw a very strong rally, and in Australia, we might see a bit of a pullback, largely with the gold prices tanking. But overall, it should be a big week and a good week, hopefully, for the rest of the world.
Yeah, just before we get on to gold, those movements there, the local market does tend to be lagging what we're seeing with the global peers.
Yeah, look, it is largely trying to catch up to that global momentum. But largely, we're seeing a lot of these top 200 companies quite, stagnated, like you mentioned, Andrew. And that's actually because, in our view, we're also kind of waiting for the RBA to make any quick decisions as well. We still not haven't seen a rate cut by the RBA so far, and we're still kind of looking forward to what we can actually do to catch up to the rest of the world. Because right now, what's actually pulling a lot of the market in the US is tech, whereas in Australia we're seeing very lagging in that particular sector. And a lot of our exports right now is focused on the commodities, and we are all kind of sitting on a sideline to see what's going to happen between China and the US. So that's why a lot of investors are being a little bit cautious at the moment.
So, Jimmy, those moves in gold has fallen now back below that 4,000 US dollar level. What are you seeing there? Now, obviously, part of the move in gold this year has been about those geopolitical risks. And then, of course, we've got that meeting ahead this week between Xi and Trump. So perhaps investors just pulling back a little at the moment.
Yeah, and on top of that, Andrew, we also saw about 2 days of discussion between China and the US in Malaysia. Both sides kind of reached that preliminary agreement on several key issues, so such as the export controls, fentanyl, and all the agricultural purchases, and even at the shipping levies as well. So that eased a lot of that geopolitical tension. So naturally, a lot of the investors have kind of rotated out of the safe havens like gold, and potentially rolling it back into a riskier asset. But in our view, Andrew, the markets is we've seen gold going, pretty much all-time high, very quickly in this year. So, we were obviously going to see this kind of reaction, sooner or later. However, I think it's still very good kind of level to even top up if there's some cash available for a lot of investors out there. Because, what we kind of discussed briefly early on, we're seeing Fed widely cutting rate by 25 basis points soon. And, following that softer CPI print as well. And also the ECB and the Bank of Japan are likely to hold the rate steady. Also, there's a big kind of catalyst that's coming up for the gold players out there. And also, we are seeing a lot of broader theme of monetary easing with the central banks, and also geopolitical realignment that will support the gold in the medium term. So not something that a lot of investors should be, making a move hastily, because obviously we're going to see a lot of gold players in the ASX pulling back today with this gold price. But, I think it's a good opportunity for a lot of people to come back into the market in gold.
Now, Jimmy, what other stocks are on your watch list at the moment?
We are still very bullish with the critical minerals. Whether this kind of US and China talks is going to get better or not this week. But in particular, we do like battery metals. So we like graphite in that space. And we just did a capital raise for a company called MV Group. Ticker code is EVG. It's one of the very few Australian companies out there in this very micro cap space where it's also cash flow positive, producing graphite through an investment, and also have a very solid project in Africa in Madagascar. So it's one of the if we kind of tune the focus back into the graphite project in Madagascar, it is the only African graphite project kind of recognized as the strategic project by the EU. And that's a huge endorsement because it kind of opens that access to EU funding, fast track permitting, and obviously there's offtake agreements as well by, European institutions like the EIB. So, what we're trying to do at the moment, what we're seeing, especially in the Western economies, we're trying to kind of roll out from the dominant Chinese production of graphite, because China controls about 9% of the production in graphite. And we've kind of seen what happened with the rare earth when the China strong arms a lot of these Western economies using their dominant production. So I think there's a big opportunity with the graphite as well. And most importantly, they just brought in another strategic investor in the critical mineral space in the US to expand their production into the US as well. So I think it's a fantastic company to watch out for today.